Hi, I'm Miss Becky from the Montgomery County Norristown Public Library, and today I'm going to show you how to make a drawstring bag. And I'm going to show you right now all of the things that you need to do this. So for this project, you need 2 rectangles of fabric. This is 11 by 13 inches. And you need 2 pieces. I will talk about making a larger project later if you want to do that on your own. But the library packet that you pick up will be 11 by 13. And you will need a pair of scissors, nice sharp fabric scissors if you have them. You need a ruler and a pencil. You need some cording and 25 inches, 2 pieces of 25-inch long cording. You could use shoelaces, you could use ribbon, anything that's washable, because you'll probably want to be able to wash your bag, so make sure it's not something that won't go through the washer. You could also cut a 2-inch strip of old t-shirt in the length that you need. As you pull on the strip, it'll roll into kind of like a cord. So that works really well as well. You'll need a safety pin and some straight pins, and of course a sewing machine, and that should be threaded with the color thread that you would like to go along with your project, either matching or contrasting, whatever floats your boat. Okay, so what we need to do now is measure down from the top 2.5 inches. First, we want to make sure that our fabric pieces are right sides facing. Well, mine looks the same either side, so it doesn't really matter for this. If you have fabric with a pattern, it's very easy to figure out which is the right side and which is the wrong side. The right side is much brighter than the wrong side. You see the difference between this is the wrong side, this is the right side. This looks much paler, whiter. The pattern is not as pronounced on this side. So we want to make sure the right side of each piece is facing the other. So right sides together would be like this. The right sides sandwiched in the middle. Okay, so we're going to take our right sides together fabric, and you're going to find 2.5 inches on your ruler. It's the long line between the 2 and the 3 here. We're going to put that up on the edge, against the edge of our fabric, and make a mark 2.5 inches down. And we're going to do this again on this edge. We're going to come down and make a mark 2.5 inches down. So you see there's a mark there, and there's a mark there. And now we're going to pin around. I'm going to start up at the mark, because what's going to happen is we're going to sew from this mark all the way down around the bottom, up the other side to the other mark. And this part on top is going to stay open. And you will see why in a little bit. That's the part that's going to hold your cording. It's called a casing. It's like a channel that your cord goes through. So it has a place to go. And we will be doing that after we do this part. So we're just going to pin about every 4 inches or so, just to make sure the fabric doesn't shift too much when we're sewing. Okay, so we're all pinned all around. We're all ready to sew. Okay, so we're going to start right where we made that mark. We're going to line that up right where the needle comes down. We're going to put the side of our presser foot even with the side of our fabric. That's going to be our guide. I'm going to take that first pin out of there so it stays out of the way. So we've got our fabric lined up with the end of our presser foot. Make sure you have 2 threads coming out of your machine. We're going to put the presser foot down And then we're going to sew, and as we sew, we're just going to keep the edge of our fabric even with the edge of the presser foot. And remember, I said we'd start by back stitching. So we're going to go forward a few stitches and then go back. So here we go. Okay, so now I'm going to go backwards. You can't see that. Go back to the mark where you started. Okay, and now keep going forward. And we're going to keep sewing. Make sure the edge of your fabric stays even with the edge of your presser foot. And keep going. I'm going to take out a pin as we come to it. We don't ever want to sew over pins. Believe me, it's not a good thing. Your sewing machine needles will break. Sometimes you get lucky and it kind of slips on by, but mostly they break. Okay, now we're almost to the edge, but not quite. We want to go about a seam's width away from the bottom edge. So we want to leave it, it's about 1/4 inch. So I'm going to do one more stitch. And then I'm going to bring my needle down into the fabric, lift the presser foot, and turn it. And then you put your presser foot down, and you have pivoted to the corner. So now, see, we're still even with the edge of the fabric. Make sure you're still even, and keep going. Until you really know what you're doing, it's best if you sew slowly, because if you start to make a mistake, you don't have a giant mistake. If you're going fast and you realize that you're making a mistake, but you don't stop right away, you've got a lot more to fix. So we want to make sure the machine pulls your fabric through. You don't have to push it. You don't have to pull it. You just kind of lightly keep your hand on the fabric so it doesn't shift away from the side of the presser foot, which is guiding how wide your seam is. So again, we're almost to the corner. I'm going to do maybe 3 more stitches. Okay, that should be good. My needle is down. My presser foot is up, and pivot. Put your presser foot down. Again, line up with the edge of the fabric, and keep sewing. Okay, pin. Okay, now be careful because we're almost to the second mark. I'm going to take that pin out. Okay, see the mark is right there. And we're going to go right up to the mark, and then I'm going to push the back button, go back a few stitches, and then come forward again. And that just doubles or triples the strength of the fabric that's right there, where it's going to get all the stress from pulling the drawstring. Okay, so now we have our piece of fabric sewn on 3 sides. So now we have this edge here that wasn't sewn. So we need to make this edge look nice and neat. So we're going to fold it over the width of the seam on each side. So you can either just pin it. I like to press it down before I sew it, just so it's nice and flat. Make sure it's even all the way up. And you want it folded over like that. Okay, so here you can see I pressed it down. Press the seam open a little bit. And then you can pin it if you've pressed it. You can pin it if you want. But it's pretty flat. It's going to stay in place, so you really don't need to mess with pins unless you want to. Now we're going to sew it down. Okay, so I want to sew close to the edge. I don't really have a way to measure it. You may have some markings on your machine, like this one has a 1/4 inch and an 8-inch marking right here on the plate that I can follow. Sometimes you just have to use your eyes and just go slowly and keep it close to the edge without going off this way or this way. So make sure your 2 threads are back there. I always like to hold on to it before I start. You're starting right at the very edge of the fabric. Make sure your needle is right where the edge of the fabric starts. Right there. And we're going to sew. So just staying close, kind of eyeball it between the raw edge, the unsewn edge, and the folded edge. And it's getting a little bunchy here. So I'm just going to release that a little bit. Okay, so when I get down to where the stitching starts, I'm going to do a little pivot. And if you don't want to do this, you can just back stitch a little and then come down the other side separately. But I'm just going to give this a little bit more sturdiness by sewing across the seam at the bottom to the other side that needs to be sewn, the other folded side. Okay, so I'm going to bring my needle down, do a pivot, and then come up the other side. And just keeping my needle right in the middle between the cut edge and the folded edge. Just go all the way to the end. Okay, so now you see, I'm sure you do. Now you see how you kind of made a little box. Came down the one side, came across the bottom, and up the other side. And that, again, gives you a little extra strength here where there's a lot of stress from the this drawstring. So I'm going to do the same thing for the other side. We're going to sew this edge down. Put your needle right at the edge of the fabric. Position it somewhere in between the cut edge and the folded edge. Make sure you have your 2 threads out back there, out of the way. And go down the edge here. And like I said, if you get down here and you don't want to go across the bottom, you can just do a few back stitches and end your seam. And then just take everything out and move it to sew down the other side. But I'm going to do the pivot thing again. Put my needle down, press her foot up, pivot, do a few stitches across to the other side. Okay. Needle down, press her foot up, pivot, press her foot down, and keep sewing. If it seems to bunch up a little bit, you can just put your needle down, straighten things out a little bit, and put your presser foot back down. Always remember to put that presser foot down before you start sewing, because then things, if you don't do that, things go crazy, and you lose control very quickly, and your seam doesn't look very good. Okay, so that part is done, and now we have the other side. So in the same way, hey, can't you? Video. Okay, so it's just like that. Okay, so now we're going to take the top and we're going to fold it. This is the wrong side. See, our raw edges are on the inside, on the wrong side. We're going to fold this down about maybe 1/2 inch. And I like to, as I said before, I like to iron my things down. If you don't, you can just sort of finger press them. And then we're going to fold down again till we get to where we ended up with our stitching. So we're going to put that fold right there at the edge of where we stitched. And then we're going to pin that down. We're going to do one side at a time, so make sure you don't get the other side. The other side is right under there. You want to make sure you don't catch that other side. So we're going to fold over, make sure it's even. Okay, so we're folded down our 1/2 inch, and then we fold the folded edge even with where we ended up sewing, right there. So we can put a pin out right there on the edge. And then I'm going to do the other side. Don't pin both sides together. Make sure they stay apart like this. We get our folded edge down to not where the stitch line goes across the bottom. You want it down to where the stitching actually ends, where the two pieces start to come away from each other. So we're going to keep pinning on this side, and then making sure we're not getting the underneath part. We're going to keep pinning up across, and just make sure that you're even there. Like I said, I would normally have my iron this all flat so that it stays nice, but we'll do it this way for now. Do the other side just the same way. I'm going to fold down about 1/2 inch, and if you want to be precise, you can measure. I'm a little bit more than 1/2 inch there, but pretty much do this without thinking too much, because I've done it all since I was your age, probably. I think I started sewing for myself when I was about 8 years old. My mother taught me how to do this. So there we go. And your side should be even. It should be the same length if you've done this correctly. And if not, you might want to just adjust and make sure that they both are the same length. And I'm going to fold this end down right to the top of the stitching. And the tops are even, pretty much. Maybe a little bit more this way. Okay. And now I'm pinning this side down. Go in there, pin. Make sure it's flat and even here. And if you are not using the library packet, and even if you are, if you decide somewhere down the road you want to make another one of these for other purposes, a bigger one, a smaller one, I forget where I was going with this. I don't know. Anyway, that's what happens when you don't get enough sleep. Your brain forgets things. Okay, so we're all pinned here on both sides. We're not pinned together. We need to keep this open because that's going to be our bag. So now we're going to sew again. I just remembered what I was going to say. If you plan to make this again, you may want to choose a sturdier, heavier fabric to do this because it's a bag and it's going to get a lot of use, especially if you use it for a book bag or kind of a backpack. If you make a bigger one, you want something that's not going to wear out really fast or get holes in it. So you could choose a denim or a broadcloth or something a little more sturdy than this fabric right here. But this will work fine for now. So we're going to put the edge of one of the folded over edges, and this is kind of problematic because this pin's in the way. I'm going to reposition this pin a little bit so it stays out of our way. Okay, we want to sew close to the edge. This is another time when you have to be watchful, and there's a little on my presser foot. I'll show you. We'll take it off and show you. On my, where is it? Hello. There we go. On my presser foot, you can see there is a little flange, a little piece that sticks out a little bit. And I use the outer edge of that to guide where I sew. You may not have that on your sewing machine, but I have it on mine, and that's kind of how I guide my eyes to see how close I am to the edge. So you've got a good 1/2 inch there, so you can make a 1/4 inch seam and still catch all the edges. Okay, so I'm going to take this pin out so I don't go over it. And again, you're going to start. I'm going to start at the very edge, and I'm going to come in a little bit and do a back stitch because, again, this is where all the action is, and we want it to be nice and strong there. Okay. So just go slowly. You don't need to hurry. Let's see, the edge of my fold is right on the edge of that little piece that sticks out there. But I'm also just watching. That's why I'm going slowly, so make sure that I don't get off track. And make sure that you're not sewing the other side. Make sure that other side is well out of the way. Pull it away from what you're sewing so that you're only doing one side at a time. A pin. Another pin. Out before I come all the way off the edge. Okay, and now I'm going to do the back stitch. And then come forward. Okay. And there we go. One side is done. Make sure you always clip off your loose threads because you don't want those hanging around. Okay, so one side is done. And you can see how close to the edge I've come. I'll make sure that you don't go off the edge because then you'll have a hole in your casing. So now we're going to turn around, we're going to flip it over and do the other side, making sure that the side you just sewed is not in the way. So keep that pulled back. Find our 2 threads, get those out of the way so they don't bunch up. Okay, we find the edge of our fabric there. I'm going to pull that pin out. So it's just going to get in the way. Okay. We're going to go in a few stitches, and then we're going to back up and keep going. Try to keep your stitches straight, your seam straight. Make sure that piece underneath is not in the way. Do not be in a hurry when you're sewing. That's when you make mistakes. Take a deep breath. Go slowly. Make sure you're doing it right as you go. Okay, there's that little cockeyed pin I stuck in there. And just keep going along to the edge. We're going to back it up here. Okay, now we've done both sides, and this is essentially finished as far as the sewing goes, but I'm going to suggest a couple things. First of all, I think I'd like to zigzag the edge a little bit if you have a zigzag stitch on your machine, which I do. I'm going to make my stitches a little bit longer than what the machine setting has. And I'm going to zigzag the edges just to give a little bit more strength. And now we're folded over a little bit up at the top, so I'm just going to start underneath where that fold is, just where it starts to flatten out there. And you want to keep your stitches in between where you've stitched your seam and the edge. So when you zigzag, make sure threads are out of the way. See how I'm keeping? You don't want your zig to go over the seam. Doesn't matter if the zag goes over the edge. That doesn't matter too much. Just keep your sewing in between here. And you see how it creates an extra edge there, extra strength on your seam. Anytime you're making something that you're going to use a lot, it's never a bad idea to reinforce the seam somehow. Okay, pivot at the bottom, keep going. Okay, so this is how we're going to square the bottom. First of all, you're going to take your ruler and you're going to mark 1 inch from the corner on your stitching. Both ways. 1 inch, 1 inch. We'll do that at both corners. 1 inch here and 1 inch. Right at the stitching. So you see, there are 2 marks at the 1 inch edge there. Okay, now you're going to pull out the sides. You have to kind of smush it around a little bit. You're going to pull that corner so it becomes a triangle. And now we're going to use a pin, which I just had here. Pin, and you're gonna, if you match, first of all, make sure your stitches are even against each other, front and back. And now we're gonna stick the pin down through 1 mark, and if we did it right, maybe we didn't do it right. If we did it right, it should come out the other side right at the other mark. So you have a triangle like this. Now at that mark, I'm going to flatten this out. And if you think this is too fiddly or too complicated, you can just skip this part. But this gives your bag a little base. So right where that 1 inch pencil mark is, you're going to put your ruler. Try to make it as straight across as possible. and draw a line. And you're going to be sewing on this line. And then you're going to do the same thing to the other side. The other corner. You're going to pull out the side so you have a point. You can kind of push that seam down to one side. Make sure your seam matches up on both sides. Find your pin, go through the mark, see if it comes out at all close to the other mark on the other side. So we're putting in here through this mark. It's a tiny bit off, but not enough to worry about. So we're going to flatten this out too. Make sure there's no wrinkles in there. And we're going to make the line across. I already did it. Make the line across with the mark as straight across as you can get. Okay. If you want, you can stick a pin just to keep things from moving around till you get it sewn. Okay, so here we have our mark, and we pinned that down. And we're going to sew across that mark. So you line up, you go right at the edge of the fabric, line up your needle. Oops, I'm still on zigzag. That's not good. I'm going to make that straight stitch. Okay, line up our needle to the mark. Make sure you know where your threads are. And then we're going to go sew. And I think I'd like to do a little back stitch there just to keep things strong. See, this is what I mean about knowing where your threads are. Get out of the way. So that'll make things bunch up if you don't get those out of the way. Okay, so we're sewing right along the mark. Oh, there's the pin. Keep going along the mark. Back up. Oh, just be careful, sometimes it bunches up when you have a folded edge like that. Okay, so there we are. There's our sewn corner. And we're going to do that to the other side. Find your threads, get them out of the way. Find your mark. Put your needle right at the edge of the fabric. Get back there, you guys. Back stitch. And you see that where the seam is starting to bunch up a little bit, so you can just reposition the presser foot, get that pin out of the way, and sew right over that edge, back stitch, put a little extra strength there, and you're done. Okay, so this is all the sewing that we need to do for this right now. Okay, so there's our corner, and we'll trim off your hanging threads. We don't want any hanging threads anywhere. And then we're gonna clip this off close to we're just gonna take that corner right off. So there, we'll do it to the other side. Get my loose threads there. Get rid of you guys, and then we're gonna trim this off. Right there. Okay. So now, when you turn it right side out, you're gonna have a little bit of a square bottom. And you can get a pencil or a knitting needle or a chopstick and sort of gently poke Make sure it's all the way out. Don't push too hard because you'll push a hole, and that's not what we want to do. And if you didn't make this square bottom, you just poke the whole corner out and make it square. Okay, so now you can see there's a bit of the base there. So when you put things in there, you'll be able to stand your bag up a little bit. Okay, so now we got to put those cords in there. I need to find where I put my cords. Okay, so you got one cord and you need your safety pin. You're going to put your safety pin on the end of your cord. Give yourself a little bit of room. This is going to be problematic because this is not meant to be separated. I have to put a little bit of tape on the end because it's kind of, my edges are kind of coming apart. If you buy cord in the store like this, you might have this problem. So I just put a little bit of tape on the end so it doesn't come apart. And you're going to stick whatever you're threading. If you have shoelaces, you can use the little end, the solid, hard end of the shoelace, the aglet. There's an actual word for it. And you can use that as your guide. So now what you're going to do, the pin is going to be your guide through the casing. So you're going to stick that in there. And you're going to kind of push your casing, bunch it up along the pin as far as you can, and then you're going to pull it through. And getting it started might be a little bit hard because it bunches up over the edge of your cord. So now we're going to keep pushing, just keep bunching your fabric up over the pin, and then pull the fabric back behind. Keep pushing, and then your pin will come out the other end, and so will your cord. But now we're going to go through the other side. So where we came out on this side, we're going to go in on this side and come through and do the same thing going across. You gotta get that pin, the end of your cord inside first. And then you can start bunching up over your pin. Just push the fabric and then take the end and pull it over the cord. Bunch up over the pin. And then pull over the cord. And bunch up over the pin. And hopefully it'll come out the other side. And then you can take the two ends of your cord. I'm going to take that piece of tape off there now because I'm going to tie a knot. And I don't want a piece of tape in the middle of my knot if I can get it off. So now it's decided it wants to stay there. It doesn't want to come off. Okay. Come on. Okay. Now you see how my cord is coming all apart. So I'm just going to match up the two ends, give myself some room here. I'm going to do an overhand knot. So you're basically wrapping it around your fingers, pulling the end, making a loop, and then pulling the ends through the loop you made. And try to pull it as close to the end of your cord as you can. Make that nice and tight. Okay, so there you can keep your drawstring like this if that suits your needs, or you can make it a little bit fancier. And I have to put I'll put the other cord through. Put another piece of tape on the end of this one. It doesn't come all apart. And we're just going to do it backwards through the other side and come around and come out this side. So I've got my pin going into my cord, maybe. Okay. Now I'm going to start. The camera's slipping. I'm going to start from this end and go through like I did before. Now this is why you need a wide casing, so you have enough room for both cords. So this is a little bit trickier because you have to go past that first cord to get started. Get in there. Okay, now we're going to bunch up again like we did before. Bunch up over the pin, pull the fabric. Bunch up over the pin, pull the fabric. Bunch, 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 and pull. Bunch, 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 pull, and then pin comes out. Ta-da! You want to pull it. Don't let your cord go all the way through. You leave enough out there because if you lose it, you have to start all over again. Now we have to go back through. We're going through from that side to this side. This side. And we're going to do that again. You get your pin started, and then push, and then pull, push, this cord's a little bit too big for the size of this bag, but you get the idea. If I had a bigger bag, this would make more sense. Pull. Pushing, pushing, pushing. Bunching, bunching. Pull. Almost there. Come on out. Oh, through that. And there we go. Okay, so now we have our two ends. Take the pin off. Close it up because you never want to leave an open pin laying around where people can get stuck on it. I'm going to take this piece of tape off somehow. Over here. Oh, don't give me problems. Now we're almost done. Ugh. Well, just pretend I took it off. I'll worry about that later. So we'll match up the ends again. Pull out enough cord so that you can wrap around your finger and tuck the ends into the loop you made. Come on through. Come on through, everybody through. And pull it tight as you can. Okay. And if you want, you can trim this down a little bit. Or if they're uneven or raggedy, you can trim off. Maybe that'll help me get that tape off. There we go. Tape this off. Just whatever kind of cord you choose, make sure that it will wash. If you have a washable bag, you need a washable cord. So now, if you pull both ends, you've got your bag. So here you go. You have your drawstring bag. Pull it open and put your stuff in. And this one might be big enough to put a book in. At least a paperback book will fit in there. You could keep school supplies in there. You could keep little toys or a little bag of things to do in the car. Toys and games and things in there. Might be big enough for a pair of pajamas and a toothbrush if you're going to stay overnight at somebody's house. You can always make a bigger bag. And how you do that is you decide the size you want. If you want to make it wider and longer, then whatever you measure across the top, you would double that and add maybe 2 inches. So like this bag, this finished bag measures 10 inches. So we did 25-inch cord. So 10 inches on one side, 10 inches on the other side. 2 times 10 is 20. And then we added 5 extra inches for the knots and for a little bit of leeway when we're closing the bag. So just add maybe 5 or 6 inches to the measurement, the finished measurement of the top of your bag, times 2. And that's how long your cord should be when you start. But you can do any size of bag. If you decide you want a bigger bag to use more like a backpack kind of thing, if you want to do like a 15-inch by 20-inch, then just add an extra 1/2 inch on this side, and this side, the 2 sides in the bottom, and then add an extra 2.5 inches on the top. So if you wanted a 15 by 20-inch bag, you would do your 15 inches plus 2.5 plus a half for the seam on the bottom, 2.5 for the casing on the top. So 2.5 plus a half is 3. So you make an extra 3 inches. So 20 inches plus 3, 23 inches long. And then the side, you need a 1/4 inch on each side for the seams. 1/4 plus 1/4 is a half. So you add 1/2 inch on each side, or even an inch. I don't know what I'm saying. You just have to allow for your seams when you measure. If you want a 15-inch bag and you have a 1/2 inch seam here and a 1/2 inch seam here, 1/2 plus a half is 1. So you'd add an extra inch. So you'd have a 16-inch wide bag. And then you'd have 23 long. 16-inch piece of fabric, 23-inch long piece of fabric to make a 15 by 20-inch bag. I hope that makes sense. There's math. Sewing is math. I'm sorry to tell you, but once you get the hang of it, you'll understand more. So I hope you enjoy using your new drawstring bag. If you did the little bottom that you can sit down flat, and if not, no biggie, you just don't have a flat bottom, but you have a very nice usable bag that you can use for a lot of different things. Thanks for joining me.